You have to believe. You have to believe. You have to believe. Believe.
This morning we're introducing you to an Army officer turned Paralympian in 2004. Melissa Stockwell became the first female American soldier to lose a limb in the Iraq War.
That's been Melissa's trademark, to have an American flag is always part of her prosthesis, extremely patriotic.
I think grit is getting through things that you never expect, these obstacles that come your way, but finding a way to persevere through them, having the heart to accept it, to move on. Instead of finding the things that went wrong, you find the things that went right. Where did it bring me? Well, it's brought me here.
You have to believe that the training you have put in is going to create the outcome that you want.
As I was finishing the course, I was thinking that I'm 44 years old. I'm a mother of two that are in the stands. It's my 4th Paralympic Games, and I'm 5th in the world, and I'm really proud of that. Thank you. Thank you. On April 13th of 2004, I woke up that day with both of my legs, and I went to sleep with just one of them. If any of you have a to-do list like I do every day where you like to check things off, I can promise you that that was not on the to-do list for the day. Didn't really want to check that one off. But that's kind of the beauty of life, is that you never know what it's going to throw at you until it does. And I knew that my chosen profession as a military officer had its risks, but you never think that something like this is going to happen to you until it does. In a moment, I'm going to share with all of you that story. But first, I just want to say a short thank you for spending some time with me today. I am very honored to be here, to be among the list of such distinguished speakers and authors. And I hope today it'll be a preview of my own book called The Power of Choice. And just a side note that in a very rare moment, my dad actually flew in from Atlanta, and he is here with me today. So, so an added bonus to have you here, Dad. So I like to say that I was born a patriot, a lover of our country from a very young age. And as I grew older, I saw military personnel. They were in the community, they were on TV. They had that uniform on, they had the flag patch on their shoulder, and you could just tell the pride that they had by wearing that uniform. So when anyone ever asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I used to say, I wanted to be in the Army. I wanted to wear that uniform, have that patch on my shoulder. So my story eventually led me out to the University of Colorado in Boulder. And freshman year, I saw these ROTC cadets marching around campus. And you could just tell how much of a team they were. So sophomore year of college, I was basically an Army ROTC recruiter's dream. I marched into his office. I said, I want to join the Army. What do I do? He's like, well, you're going to sign these 100 pieces of paper, which I happily did, handed them back, and he gave me my very first BDU Army camo uniform. Went back to my dorm room, I put it on, and just knew that that's what I was supposed to do with my life. So I don't come from a military family. My parents knew of my desire to be in the Army, but I think to them it was kind of a phase I was passing through, because to them, why would their youngest daughter actually want to be in the Army? So imagine their surprise when sophomore year I dialed up their number and I called them and I said, guess what, Mom and Dad? I'm wearing my first uniform. I'm going to be commissioned as an officer in a few years, and I'm going to be in the Army. There was kind of this awkward pause, as parents can do well. We all know it. I do it now also. And my dad, not sure if he remembers this or not, blurts out, are you sure they allow girls in the Army? So it was this unknown world that we were all diving into together. But of course they do, and I fell in love with everything that went along with it. I got to learn about military history and battle drills. I got to learn to be a leader. I got to paint my face in mud and roll around in it, and I loved everything that it stood for. And then senior year of college came up, and a day came up on the calendar that changed the world, a day that none of us will ever forget, September 11th of 2001. And if you recall, this day was a Tuesday, And like every Tuesday in college, it was ROTC day, which basically meant I woke up, I put my uniform on, went into campus. Only on this specific day, we sat in a room, all of us in our uniform, as we watched the horrific news unfold on TV. And it was this day that our instructor looked at us all and he said, today, your lives are going to change. It's not a matter of if you'll be deployed to a foreign country. It is more a matter of when. So the uniform that I was so proud to wear on American soil, I knew I'd probably be wearing it on foreign soil as well. But first, a few months later, I graduated, and I was commissioned as a brand new Army officer with my once very skeptical but now proud parents by my side, as they set me off into the wide world of the Army. So you fast forward a couple years to the fateful day of April 13th, 2004. I woke up early, as we did every day, over in Iraq, put on my uniform, bulletproof vest, Kevlar, and we had our briefing for the day's mission. This mission was very similar to all the other ones I had done. The only difference on this day is that when I got into my Humvee, instead of sitting next to the driver, which I would typically do, I was sitting behind the driver. My only real job that day was to learn the route. The next day I was going to take over, I was going to lead that route, so I just kind of like pay attention to where I was going. Right before we left our little forward operating base, the gate, I had a soldier run up and he said, ma'am, would you like me to put a pedestal mount on your vehicle? So a pedestal mount is what you see here. It's that little piece that's kind of connected to the door, and it allows me to rest my leg on it, and it's not needed, but it adds this extra sense of ease. When you drive down, you can point your weapon out, and it's just, but again, it's not really needed. And at the time, it really felt like I was invincible. So I said, sure, let's put this pedestal mount on my door. And it's a reminder all these years later that the little choices that you make in life, like the smallest ones that you think they are, can have a really big impact down the road. So our vehicle left our forward operating base. And a few minutes into the ride, about 10 minutes into the ride, we came under this bridge, an underpass you would drive under and not even think about what you're driving under. As we drove under it, there was this deafening boom. Black smoke, the smell of metal. I looked up, the windshield has crashed in. The woman in the front is yelling, IED, IED, we've hit an IED, which we all knew meant our vehicle had been struck by a roadside bomb. We swerved to the left, we hit a guardrail, we swerved back to the right, and we end up crashing into this woman's house. The other soldiers in the vehicle did exactly what they were supposed to do. They got out, they surrounded it, they pointed their weapons out to assess the situation, to see what they should do next. So I did exactly that, tried to at least. I took my seatbelt off, I looked over, I looked down, and I knew something was wrong. The pedestal mount was gone. There was a lot of blood. And I called out, I'm hurt, I am hurt. Lucky for me, there was a combat medic trained in field first aid a few vehicles back, and he heard me. He rushed up to my vehicle, he pulled me out of it, and he laid me there on the sands of Iraq. At the time, I had no idea the extent of my injury. I was on my back, there was a lot of commotion. I couldn't tell what was happening below my waist. I thought the medic was giving me first aid, but it wasn't until that medic put the tourniquet on and started to tighten it down where, number one, the pain starts. And number two, the realization that whatever is happening here is really not a good situation. And a few days later, seeing this picture from my hospital bed that was in the Stars and Stripes military newspaper, and realizing that that was my vehicle, that was a crashed-in windshield, that was my own blood. A picture that was once really hard to look at. But I can look at this picture years later and think about how far I've come. The power of the human spirit. But it was hard to believe that from this exact moment in Iraq, just 1 year earlier, I was at my very first military duty assignment, Fort Hood, Texas, as part of the 1st Cavalry Division. And as this brand new Army officer, I'm thrown into these roles of being put in charge of soldiers older than I was as a platoon leader. I was put in charge of millions of dollars worth of equipment as part of the Army Transportation Corps. A daunting challenge, the one that I was ready to tackle head on. And then a few months later, orders came down that my division, the 1st Cavalry Division, was going to deploy over to Iraq in early 2004. So our green uniforms were changed to the desert color. The vehicles went from that army green to that desert sand color. And in early 2004, boarded a plane with thousands of my best friends to what was supposed to be a year-long tour over in Iraq. But first we land in Kuwait, and you landed in this surreal moment where you step off the plane and you feel the heat, the weight of your equipment. You drive down these barren desert landscape roads, you look across in the distance, and you see these little huts, and you realize that they're people's homes, and just how different the day-to-day life is over there. Spending a few weeks in Kuwait before making the long road trip from Kuwait up into Iraq, and you cross that border and your heart starts to beat a little bit faster. You get to the bustling city of Baghdad, and there is just commotion everywhere and people, and you just have no idea, do they want you there, do they not, or really what your day-to-day life is gonna be like. But eventually getting to a town called Taji, which was just north of central Baghdad, and that's where we were gonna be for the next year. And kind of settling into our new normal. My new normal included 2 jobs. The first was my favorite, because I got to be a platoon leader, which means I got to lead 20 of some of the finest men and women that I've ever known. A lot of them 18 years old, just out of high school, trying to find their way in the world, but they find themselves with me as their leader in this faraway land, but you become a family. That camaraderie is just stronger than ever. My other job was as a convoy commander. So as a convoy commander, you're in charge of kind of leading a whole bunch of vehicles from one point to the next, delivering various supplies. You're in charge of communications with headquarters, the route, the soldiers, just kind of making sure everything went as it should. We had been in Iraq for 3 weeks, but I was a proud soldier. I was leading soldiers. I was carrying out missions. You just never think that a roadside bomb is gonna come into your own life, because things like that you think only happen to somebody else. But this time, it wasn't somebody else, it was me. I'm like out of a movie, lifted from the sands of Iraq, put in the back of this big 5-ton military-style pickup truck, driven to the nearest aid station, put on a helicopter, flown to the nearest American hospital, which happened to be right in central Baghdad, rushed into what I was later told was a life-saving surgery. There was a lot of blood being lost. And it wasn't until I woke up from that surgery, I looked to the surgeon next to me and I said, did something happen to my leg? And that's when, in his very blunt military way, he says, it's gone. You don't have it anymore. And all these years later, I feel like what I should have said was, well, can you look again? Because it seems surreal that in an entire second, a leg is gone. I mean, I had no choice in the matter. But instead, he handed me a phone, this big military-style phone, this big antenna. And he said, would you like to call your parents? And it brought me back to that sophomore year of college where I called them up to tell them I joined the Army. And here I was dialing their number again. My mom answered, and she was all excited. She had not heard from me in a while. Having to stop her pretty quickly and say, Mom, something bad happened. And knowing that what I was about to tell her was gonna break part of her. Handing the phone off to the surgeon, who continued to tell my mom that her youngest daughter, me, had been severely wounded in a war. And hearing the anguish of a mother as she's screaming, don't let them take her leg, but knowing that neither she or I could do anything about it because it was gone. But it's those kind of things that sticks with you. But I had a choice. So life is all about choices. So you have to move on. So from that Baghdad emergency room, I had no choice but to physically move on, which I did. And I went to Rancho, Germany from that Baghdad emergency room to kind of stabilize before making the long trip back home to Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And it just so happened that my dad was on business in Europe. My sister lived there. So the day after this life-changing traumatic injury, I had 2 immediate family members rush in my hospital room to be by my side. Talk about a team. Talk about starting things off right, literally on the right foot. That's all I had left. You can laugh at that. You can laugh at that. So spending a few days in Rancho before making the long trip back home, this time to the United States, to Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And here was where my mom met me. And again, here are my parents, once skeptical of me joining the military, and then proud, the horror of that phone call. But now by my side and oftentimes reassuring each other that things were gonna be okay. And when I was able to kind of, come off the pain medicine and out of my hospital room, I looked around at Walter Reed and I saw soldiers missing 2, 3, 4 limbs. They had traumatic brain injuries, so they had lost their eyesight. And I looked at myself and I thought, holy cow, I'm the lucky one. 1 leg, that was it. I had 3 good limbs and I had my life because too many people had given and continue to give that ultimate sacrifice. And making a promise then to live my life for those who had, not to let losing a leg stop me from doing anything that I wanted to do. And I did receive a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, medals that you never expect to get, but ones that are proudly displayed in my home. But what made my time at Walter Reed great, the doctors, the nurses, the family, the friends that dropped everything they were doing to come and let me know that they were there for me. But you can imagine it's hard, right? I was 24 years old, and in a second, my life is forever changed. So laying there in that hospital bed wondering what my life would be like. Would I ever walk? Would I run? Would I live an independent lifestyle? But lucky for me, at Walter Reed, they did whatever they could to help us pass the time. And we would have a lot of visitors. So they were high-ranking military officers, politicians, celebrities. And I like to share some of my favorites because they still stand out to me. So I'd been at the hospital for a few weeks, and one morning the nurse comes in and she's very excited. And she's like, guess who you're gonna meet today? And I'm like, oh, who am I gonna meet? And a few hours later, there's a knock at my door, and I look over, and who's standing there but Tom Hanks? He comes in, we talk about him running during Forrest Gump, we talk about that volleyball named Wilson from the movie Castaway, and I'm on this like Tom Hanks high. And then, a few days later, another knock at the door. I look over, and who's standing there but the Osbournes? So they come into the room. Sharon sits down on the bed. I have no clue how to small talk with Sharon Osbourne. Ozzy wanders around. There's a stack of chairs. He tries to climb up. They're lovely, but they're a little bit blurry, kind of like the picture. But I will forever be grateful of everyone that came and let us know that what we had done mattered. I also learned at Walter Reed that as kind of as silly as it may sound, it's okay to celebrate the loss of a leg. So a lot of soldiers have what they call their Alive Day. So basically every year on the day that they're injured, instead of mourning what they've lost, they celebrate what they still have. Pretty genius idea. Other than maybe your own birthday, when's the last time any of you took a moment to maybe sit back, reflect on your life, not the negative things that we're so in tune to think about, but the good parts of it? And it's the little things that we take for granted, a roof over our head, warm bed at night, food on the table. But we're so lucky to live the lives that we do. So loving this idea and deciding that I wanted to take it one step further, and I actually named what's left of my leg, Little Leg. It's a leg that's short, it made sense. And decided that every year I was gonna have a birthday party for Little Leg. That is my leg on with a hat that says life is good. And it's become this day that means so much more than my own birthday. Family flies in, friends fly in, and it's this day of reflection and to celebrate on the good parts of life. But out of all of this, what I really wanted to at that time was to get my life back, like back in the hospital and figure out how my life would work. So back at Walter Reed, down in the physical therapy gym, regaining the strength I had lost. And then the day came where I was fit with my very first prosthetic leg, the series of castings and measurements. And then a few days later, like sit in the parallel bars, they hand you this leg that's like metal and plastic, and they're like, now this is your leg, and you're gonna walk with this. And I remember thinking like, wait, this is not my leg. Standing up in the parallel bars, looking across the physical therapy gym and seeing another veteran, he was missing both of his legs and an arm. And guess what he was doing? He was walking. Perspective in life is everywhere. So what do? Well, you walk. First in the parallel bars, and then it was crutches, and then a cane. And then the day came where I realized that my life would go on. The only difference is every day I'd wake up, I'd put my prosthetic leg on, and I'd go about my day just like all of you do. But as soon as I learned to walk, I wanted more. I was a gymnast when I was younger, I was an athlete, and I had dreamed of all these big athletic things I was gonna do. So I would lay in my hospital bed wondering, could I still be an athlete? The sweat on my face, the thrill of a finish line. So as exciting as learning to walk was, even more exciting is what I like to call the start of Melissa Stockwell 2.0. So there were these organizations whose missions were to come into our hospital room and get us out doing things that we never thought we'd do with 2 legs, much less with 1. So it took every opportunity that presented itself. And before I knew it, I was in New York City doing the New York City Marathon on a bike that I powered with my arms. A race I would go back and run years later. But at this moment, crossing that finish line and realizing I could still be an athlete. Then a few weeks later, going out to Colorado. And after growing up skiing on both legs, this time on that bunny hill, on one leg, wobbly all over the place, falling. But by the end of the week, all the way up the chairlift, flying down the mountain, the wind in my face, and I had never felt so free. Going back home to Walter Reed, thinking if I can do that, I can do anything. And it came at the perfect time because someone came to Walter Reed and put a presentation on about the US Paralympics. And I sat in a room similar to this one, not in a library though, where this gentleman with a booming voice said, if you train hard enough and you dedicate yourself to a sport, then you can compete on the world's biggest athletic stage as somebody with a disability. As a young gymnast who dreamt of going to the Olympics, obviously that didn't happen, but I sat in that room thinking, oh my gosh, I have a second chance. Not only that, but I could represent a country I defended over in Iraq on the world's biggest stage. And I left that room knowing that somehow, some way, I wanted to be a Paralympian. But first, I was medically retired from the Army, set off back to school, and this time into a new career field in the field of prosthetics. So learning how to fit other amputees with artificial limbs and seeing the reward of literally getting a patient back up on their feet and showing them what they could do. But this idea of being a Paralympian was always in the front of my mind. And I decided that I wanted to give it a shot in the sport of swimming. So if any of you are swimmers out there, you might agree that the water, it has a healing effect. I would get in the water and almost forget as though I didn't have a leg. And no, I don't swim in circles. I do swim straight. And I love the smell of chlorine, so it all kind of worked out. But the Paralympic Games is not like the military. I'm not just signing up and going. You have to beat your competitors. You have to make certain times. And my times were here, and they had to come way down here if I had any shot of making it a reality. So I put everything on hold, moved out to Colorado Springs to the Olympic Training Center, where I swam, I slept, and I swam and I swam with hopes of making this Paralympic dream happen. Almost 4 years to the day after losing my leg, there was a Paralympic trials, and this is where I had to showcase how fast I was, where I needed to be near the top of the world, and I was a total long shot. My times had come down, but I was nowhere near where I needed to be. But I learned something pretty great at this Paralympic trials. Hard work, belief in yourself, pays off. You guys know that. And at this Paralympic trials, I took 20 seconds off a 400-meter freestyle, broke American records I didn't even know existed. I was so far from them. And at the end of these trials, when my times took me high enough in the world to be named to that Paralympic team, this whole journey from Baghdad to Beijing, it came full circle. And to me, it just made sense. So the next step was the Beijing Paralympics. And if any of you watched the 2008 Olympic Games, you might remember seeing Michael Phelps. He won 8 gold medals in this water cube, this structure that they built just for the Olympic and the Paralympic Games. So I got to watch Michael Phelps win his medals, and then a few weeks later, I found myself standing in that water cube with my coach, imagining myself taking another 20 seconds off, because that was realistic, but doing whatever I could do to make my country proud. So I swam in a few different events, and every day I would come out to the blocks with my crutches. I would look up into the stands and see if my family and friends holding a flag that said, Little Leg Fan Club. And I knew that whatever happened, that they were there for me. And I wish I could tell you that I did well athletically, but I didn't. I didn't have best times, I didn't make finals, and you have to realize that this was my life, this was everything at the time. And at the end of this biggest competition of my life, I felt like I had let everybody down. My family, my friends, my teammates, my country. Instead of being on the podium, they gave me a participation medal. I wanted to chuck that thing out the window because I thought I've come all this way and that's all I got. But I learned a pretty great lesson. In life, we all want to be on top, right? You want the recognition, you want your hard work to pay off, but it's not always about that. At the end of the Paralympic Games, there's a closing ceremonies, and an athlete is nominated by all of their Team USA peers to carry the American flag in and represent them all, typically reserved for someone who has much more than a participation medal. But when my teammates nominated me for this honor in Beijing, I realized that it's about the journey. It's about the journey to get someplace, overcoming these obstacles that come your way, having the heart to persevere through them. And a lot of times you end up even better on the other side. And I think in moments in life, we have these moments that you kind of wish you can go back and live over and over again. And for me, this was one of them, just the power of that moment. So how do you beat that? Competing in the Paralympic Games, carrying the flag in. Well, I went back home, went back to work. And again, that reward of showing these prosthetic patients firsthand that they could still get up and get out and live their life. But once you're an athlete, you're always an athlete. And soon after Beijing, I got a phone call and someone said, hey, you want to do a triathlon? So a triathlon, for those that are not familiar, is you swim, you bike, and you run, like all at the same time, in the same place, like something I used to think, like who would want to do that? But I thought, you know what, always up for a challenge, let's give it a try. So I flew out to California, and I did my first triathlon. I swam, I biked, I ran, I crossed the finish line, and I was hooked. The challenge of all three sports, being on the same course as able-bodied athletes, coming in from the bike, and I was trying to get like one leg off, another leg back on. There was like legs everywhere, like trying to figure it out. But I fell in love with it. And turns out I wasn't so bad. And for the next many years, able to travel around the nation, around the world as part of the national team. And crossing that finish line, flag held high, that's something that just never gets old. And then a few years later, wanting to kind of one-up myself and sign up for the elusive Ironman, which are for those that are a little bit crazy. You swim 2.4 miles, you bike over 100, you run a marathon, 26.2 miles, like in the same day, and you pay to do this thing. So deciding that I wanted to see if I had the mental capacity to finish it. It wasn't about winning it, it was about finishing it. So the race takes all day. So you start the swim when it's dark. So it was dark. I swam, I biked. I was on mile 20 of the run, and it was dark again. It had been that long. I'm carrying glow sticks to see where I'm going, and I was miserable. I was so miserable, and I couldn't figure out why I was out there doing it. So I stopped in place to think about, why am I out here? And I realized that I was out there because I could be. I was running for those that no longer could. And using that motivation to get those last couple miles in, crossing the finish line and hearing that I was an Ironman. And the realization on this day that we don't give ourselves enough credit on the things that we're capable of doing. If you get out there, if you just try, it's amazing what you can do. So it's been a wild ride. And I can honestly tell you that I have done more in my life with one leg than I ever would have done with two. The people I've met, the opportunities that I've had. And true to word, every April 13th, we celebrate. Last year, little leg turned 20. And these celebrations include, we may or may not dance on the bar with my dad. We may or may not drink out of my leg. That's for those that come to find out. Dad, don't give away too many secrets. But it's a day to celebrate. It's not just little leg's life and my life, but everyone's life. And it's a day to reflect on all the years that we've had. And when I think back on the last many years that I have had some pretty incredible moments along the way. I've been able to share a dance and ride a bike with George Bush at his ranch in Texas. Been able to share a laugh with former First Lady Michelle Obama. I even got a presidential kiss from George Bush when I presented him with a flag that flew over the Olympic Village. Been able to share my story on some major news networks, this one on Katie Couric, which was apparently Red Dress Day. A fist bump from the legendary news anchor Tom Brokaw. I've been able to stand in a room with, at the time, were all 5 living presidents and their spouses on a day that wasn't about politics as everything is right now. It was about bringing both sides together. The honor of being asked to say the Pledge of Allegiance at an opening of a presidential library. Going home that evening just exuding patriotism. Just really proud of where my story had brought me. And most recently, was able to present some Team USA gear to our former President and First Lady. And out of all these, it doesn't matter, do you love them, do you hate them? Are you on this side, are you on this side? When it comes down to it, we're all under the same flag. And it's my hope that we all continue to believe in each other, because I know that I continue to believe in all of you. Out of all this, though, what I am most proud of is giving back. And back in Chicago, co-founding a group called Dare to Try, where we get athletes with physical disabilities into the sport of triathlon. We take away all the barriers, the expensive adaptive equipment, the coaching, the training, and we get them to the starting line. They swim, they bike, they run, they get to that finish line, and it's just the beginning, the self-confidence, the self-worth that they get. Our motto is one inspires many, and our athletes inspire both on and off the race course. And it's one of my most professional accomplishments. And then, of course, on the personal side, my husband, Brian, my son, Dallas, my daughter, Millie, the dog, Murphy, and the joy of being a parent, the best and the hardest job in the world, but also the joy of being a parent that looks a little bit different, and being able to show my kids firsthand that we all have something unique about us. Every single one of us does. Mine is a little bit more visual, but showing my kids that they should embrace what makes them different, because that's what makes the world great. And it's my hope that they see me do that and have these big dreams, and in turn, they embrace what makes them different. And they have big dreams of their own, and they chase them. I'm sure if any of you were to get up here and share your story, that you all would have learned something from your journey. We all learn as we go. And when you think back, it's pretty incredible, all the things that you can bring with you and to share. So I, too, have learned quite a bit along my own journey. The first being, life is short. It's short and it's fragile. And a few years ago when COVID hit, a lot of us felt that more than others. I've also learned, as cliche as it might seem, is that dreams, they can come true. In September of 2016, mine did. I had my son Dallas. I was able to get back into peak athletic shape and qualify for my second Paralympic Games in the sport of triathlon, this time in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Of all days that my race could have taken place, the day was September 11th. You can imagine the meaning. Waking up in Rio, putting on that Team USA uniform, knowing that every swim stroke, every bike pedal, every run step, it wasn't for me. Those that no longer could. Swimming, biking, and running up and down the streets of Copacabana Beach, crossing the finish line in third, getting a bronze medal that felt like a personal gold. On this incredible day, because my teammates got gold and silver. It was a USA sweep on September 11th. We saw not one, not two, but 3 American flags go up as we heard our national anthem. Standing on that podium, thinking about all those years ago, someone in Iraq, they tried to take my life. They didn't. They took my leg, but they did not take my spirit. My teammate next to me, who lost her leg to cancer in the years prior, she did not let that stop her. Standing there, showing the world the power of the American spirit and how much ability is in a disability. And this time, hugging my dad, my husband, with tears of joy, just so proud to be there. And the best part about it was going home, putting the medal around my son's neck, and the culmination of the Mommy Road to Rio. And because we chose not to bring him because he was so young, we did have these jumbo-sized heads made of him for people to bob around the race course for that extra motivation. So I want to pause here for just a second and share with you a few more things that I've learned. And the hope is that when we're done here today, you walk out of this room and you bring them with you. Maybe you think about them in a few hours, tonight, whatever it may be, but you apply them to your own life. First, power of a team. I've been fortunate to experience teamwork in all aspects of my life. In the military, it resonated in everything that we did. When I was on that podium in Rio, it wasn't just me up there. It was my team that got me there. Find your people. Find your people that you can call when days are hard, because that's life. Days can be hard, but they can be so good. And find those people you can call to celebrate in the smallest of successes, because truly, we are all in this life together. I've also come to realize that we don't give ourselves enough credit on the things that we're capable of doing. If you would have told me all those years ago, so guess what, Melissa? You're going to go to a war. You're going to lose a leg, but you're going to be okay. You're going to become a Paralympian. You're going to have this family. You're going to share your story. I would have thought, whoa, 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 like that's not happening. But it did, because I'm telling you about it. For me, the catalyst was losing a leg to kind of reach into this pocket of potential I always had. I just had to kind of like reach a little bit deeper. So how do all of you skip the roadside bomb part and find your own potential? Well, you start by believing that you can. It sounds so simple, but it's so powerful. When you come up on a situation and you think, oh, there is no way I could do that, you turn it around. Actually, I can do blank. And you fill that blank in with whatever your Paralympic moment may be. A few years ago, my husband and I wanted to open our very own prosthetic clinic in Colorado Springs. Opening a business, it's hard, it's scary. What's it going to be like? We opened it in January of 2020. And 2 months later, COVID hits. But this many years later, we made it through, and we are a thriving business that have helped hundreds of patients regain a positive life. But we never would have impacted them had we not tried. Change is hard. It is scary. There's many questions there. But try it, because you never know until you try. This picture is of my lowest of lows. In that Baghdad emergency room, the T on my forehead stood for tourniquet. So if anybody found me, they knew that I had been severely wounded. When I see this picture now, to me, it stands for turning point. This was the turning point of my life. This was the day I realized that you can't change the things that happen to you. I couldn't change the fact that a roadside bomb hit my vehicle. I don't think anybody would have doubted me if I said, oh, woe is me, I lost a leg. But instead I made a choice to say, all I lost is one leg. Now let's get back to living. And I'm so proud that I have done just that. So much so that there's been 2 other Paralympic Games along the way. Paris a few months ago and Tokyo 2021, where there were no spectators there thanks to COVID other than these silent jumbo-sized heads that cheered us on along the course. But I show you these pictures of me finishing in Tokyo, and you think, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. Did I win? Was I on the podium? The answer to both of those is neither. I was 5th in my 3rd Paralympic Games. 1 month before this exact moment, training up, leading into Tokyo. I was on a bike, I hit a branch, I flew off my bike, I hit a tree, and I fractured my back. The doctor kept telling me it was the best place to break a back, things you never really think you hear a doctor say. I didn't have to have surgery, I just had to rest. Well, rest is the last thing I wanted to do 1 month before a race I had trained 5 years for. But like anything, I had a choice. I could still be on that starting line in Tokyo, choosing to just live in the moment, not to care about what happened yesterday, what's happening tomorrow, and just to be. And then a few months ago in Paris, swimming, biking, and running up and down the iconic course in Paris, down the Champs-Élysées, the Eiffel Tower in the distance. I did swim in that Seine River, and I did live to tell about it. And this one being even more special because my family was there and hearing the go, mommy, go of my kids. My son being the one to hand me that American flag as I finished that race. And coming down the finish line thinking that I was 44 years old, mother of two, 4th Paralympic Games, and I was 5th in the world, and I was so proud of that. The power of choice, thank you. Thank you. The power of choice has been so applicable in my own life that I wrote a book about it. That's why I'm here, guys. And the idea is that the reader finishes the book that's much more detailed than what you heard here today, and that they apply the lessons and the things in it to their own life, realizing that whatever comes your way, whatever obstacles happen, that you can get through them. And it's my sincere hope that none of you ever encounter a real roadside bomb, but there are metaphoric ones that are all around us. COVID was one of them, loss of a loved one, pets, divorce, whatever it may be. But knowing that the more you can handle and come out okay on the other side, the easier it is to overcome it next time. Knowing that the sun does shine tomorrow. Knowing that whatever you've gone through, whatever you're going through, there is a silver lining, and you can focus on that. So the next time things don't go your way, which they will, might be as you walk out of this room today, maybe when you go home tonight, whatever it is. How are all of you going to use your power of choice to rise up and to live the life that all of you want to live? So typically, this concludes my speech, but I want to do one really special thing and bring my dad up, if that's okay. Whoop, whoop. My dad should get a standing ovation, you guys.
So thank you for the attention, Elizabeth.
Love you, Dad.
How do you do?
Thank
She's got
you.
us through so much. Thank you so much. Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you.